It was a Saturday, the kind of quiet, slow day I always used to look forward to. A day to relax, take a breath, and maybe start planning the next steps in my life. But that morning, as I was sipping my coffee and staring out the window, the phone rang, and I knew the peace wouldn't last. The number on the screen was familiar, too familiar. It was my mom. The moment I saw it, I felt a knot form in my stomach. I wasn't sure what I was expecting, but I knew it was going to be something that would pull me back in. Something that would make me feel guilty for the life I'd built for myself. "Grace," she said, her voice as sharp as ever. "We need you to come through for the family. Chloe's wedding is getting expensive. And, well, you know how it is. We could really use your connections with the venue. Can you make it happen?" Chloe, my younger sister, the golden child, always the one who could do no wrong. Always the one who got everything handed to her. I didn't expect it to be any other way. I had spent my whole life watching her drift through the world, while I worked tirelessly to build something real, and somehow, it was always me they turned to when things got messy. But Chloe, with her endless charm and good luck, never seemed to have to put in the effort. I could feel the frustration building in my chest. But I kept my voice even. "Sure, Mom," I said. "I'll take care of it." I should have said no. I should have told her I couldn't help, that I had too much on my plate, that I was sick of being the family's problem solver. But that's not what I did. That's never what I did. I said yes. Again. As I hung up, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. It was the same pattern, the same cycle that I had been stuck in for years. And now, here I was again, doing the same thing, letting them pull me back in, knowing full well that no matter how much I gave, it would never be enough. I spent the next few hours in a haze, going through the motions of my day, trying to focus on my work. But in the back of my mind, all I could hear was that one sentence: "We need you to come through for the family." I was tired. Tired of always being the one who gave. Tired of watching Chloe get everything she wanted without lifting a finger. Tired of being the one they only reached out to when they needed something, when they couldn't figure things out on their own. Later that evening, when I arrived at the engagement party, I felt the familiar weight of my family's expectations. It was a lavish affair, something straight out of a magazine. Chloe looked radiant in her dress, glowing with the kind of ease I would never have. The wedding wasn't about love. It wasn't about the couple. It was about showing off. It was about perception. I should have been proud of helping her make this happen. Proud of the fact that my connections and my hard work had made this day possible. But instead, I felt like a ghost, standing at the edge of the room, just a shadow of the person I had worked so hard to become. No one even acknowledged my presence. Not really. As the night wore on, Chloe took the stage to give her toast. She thanked everyone for their support, for helping her get to this point. "I couldn't have done it without my sister Grace," she said, her voice carrying over the microphone. "She's been my right hand through all of this." The words were like salt on an open wound. I smiled, because that's what I was supposed to do. I smiled and nodded, as the crowd clapped and cheered, but inside, I felt hollow, because I knew the truth. I wasn't her right hand. I was just the one who always picked up the slack. I was the one who always made things work when no one else could. But they never saw me for who I really was. They never saw the woman who had fought to get where she was, to build something from nothing. They only saw the one who could be relied on when things fell apart, the one who would always say yes. As the night went on, I found myself retreating to the balcony, needing some space, some air. I was suffocating in the noise of the party, in the sound of glasses clinking, in the laughter that echoed in the background. But in that moment, I felt more alone than I ever had. I didn't belong there, not in this world, not in the world where family meant constant sacrifice and never being enough. And that was when I realized it. I was done. I had been giving, and giving, and giving, and for what? For nothing. For a pat on the back, a fleeting moment of gratitude that was quickly forgotten. I pulled my phone from my pocket and stared at the message from my mom. It was a follow-up to our earlier conversation. "Grace, we really need you to sign off on the venue contract for Chloe's wedding. The deposit has to be paid immediately. We don't want to lose the space. I felt my pulse quicken. The familiar wave of guilt started to rise. But this time, something was different. This time, I didn't feel the compulsion to drop everything and make things right for them. Instead, I took a deep breath, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. I knew what I had to do. I'm not signing this. I'm done. Figure it out on your own. I hit send, and for the first time in years, I felt a sense of calm. The next few days after I sent that message were some of the quietest I'd ever had. I was alone, which was nothing new. But the silence felt different. It wasn't oppressive this time, it was freeing. I had spent so much of my life listening to the endless noise of my family's demands, their expectations, their judgments, and now nothing. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe again. But as the days passed, the reality started to set in. It wasn't just about a wedding. It was about a life I had built, a future that I had worked for, and how easily it had been taken for granted by the people who should have supported me the most. I spent my days working on my business, trying to push the thoughts of my family out of my mind, but I could never fully escape them. Every email, every text, felt like a weight. They kept coming. They were relentless, trying to pull me back into the role I had always played. The fixer, the problem solver, the one who always cleaned up their mess. At night, when I finally closed my laptop and tried to sleep, the thoughts still haunted me. I couldn't help but feel a gnawing sense of guilt. Was I being too harsh? Was I abandoning them? But then I would remember everything they had put me through, every time they had asked for help, knowing full well they would never return the favor. Every time they had assumed I would step in and save the day, never bothering to ask how I was doing or what I needed. They took me for granted, and this time, I wasn't going to let it slide. The phone rang on the third day after I sent the message. I didn't need to look at the caller ID to know who it was. My mother. The message was always the same, just in different words. Grace, we really need to talk. Chloe's wedding is coming up, and we're in a tight spot. You're the only one who can help us out. Please, just help us one more time. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The words were always the same. The same tone, the same sense of urgency, the same guilt trip. I had heard it all before, and I wasn't going to fall for it this time. Instead of calling back, I picked up my phone and typed a message to my lawyer. What's the next step I need to move forward with this? Within a few minutes, I got a response. I'll send you the trust documents. You should file the notice of interest as soon as possible to protect the estate. Once that's in place, we can move forward with securing your control over the property. I read the message twice, making sure I understood everything. My control over the property, the estate. It felt surreal. It felt like I was finally putting all the pieces together. But I wasn't going to rush it. I had learned the hard way that patience was key. I needed to make sure everything was perfect, that every detail was in place before I made my move. The stakes were too high now. If I made one wrong move, it could all fall apart. The next day, I sat down with the trust documents in front of me. The legal papers that would finally give me the power I had been denied for so long. The papers that would protect me from the constant manipulation. The papers that would finally allow me to take control. I read through them carefully, marking the clauses that I needed to focus on. Clause 12 stood out, the one that gave me the authority over the property. The one that allowed me to veto any changes without my consent. It was my ace in the hole. Once everything was in place, I called the county clerk's office to file the notice of interest. They confirmed that everything was good to go, that the filing would be processed and recorded. My heart raced as I hung up the phone. This was it, the first step in taking back my life. I didn't hear from my family again for a few days, but the pressure was still there. I could feel it, a weight pressing down on me. They were waiting for me to cave, to come back, to fix everything again. I knew they were trying to figure out what to do next, trying to come up with a plan to force me into action. But I wasn't going to give in. I had already made my decision. And no matter how many times they called, how many times they tried to guilt me into helping them, I wasn't going to play their game anymore. The phone rang again. This time, it was my sister, Chloe. I hesitated for a moment before answering. Grace, we need to talk, she said. her voice sounding more distant than I had ever heard it. I know things have been tense, but we're really in a bind here. I need you. You're the only one who can help us. For a moment, I thought I heard sincerity in her voice. But then I remembered. I remembered all the times she had used me. All the times she had walked away without a second thought while I was left to pick up the pieces. No. Chloe, I said, my voice steady. I'm done helping you. I'm done being the one who cleans up your messes. It's time for you to figure it out on your own. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could hear Chloe's breath catch. Could hear the hurt in her voice. But I didn't care. I wasn't going to let them use me anymore. I don't understand, she said quietly. You're my sister. You're supposed to be here for me. I've been here for you. Chloe, I replied, my voice softer now. For years, but that's not enough for you. Is it? You always expect more, and I'm not doing it anymore. You're not my responsibility. With that, I hung up. I could feel the weight of it. The decision I had just made. I was cutting ties, finally setting boundaries. And for the first time in years, I felt like I was finally free. Where are you watching from? Hit subscribe. We need to talk about families, money, and the power to stand up for yourself. The silence of the last few days after my decision had been oddly peaceful. For the first time in years, I wasn't tied down by the expectations of my family, the guilt trips, or the constant demands. I felt a sense of freedom I hadn't even realized I was missing. But I knew this calm wouldn't last long. Family wasn't something you could just walk away from. Even if you made a decision like I did, there was always a backlash. And I knew it was coming. The question wasn't if it would come, it was when. It came sooner than I expected. 2 days after my conversation with Chloe, I received an email. The subject line was simple, Grace. We really need to talk. My heart sank. I knew who it was from. Even before I opened it, the sender was my mother. And there was no way this was a casual check-in. Grace, I know things have been difficult lately, but you need to understand that we are family. We need to help each other. Chloe's wedding is so important, and she's really struggling. Please, I'm asking you to help us again. This isn't about money, it's about supporting each other through tough times. I stared at the screen for a long time, reading the email over and over. It was exactly what I had expected. The guilt, the subtle manipulation, the implied obligation. It wasn't about Chloe. And it wasn't about family. It was about them wanting me to do what I had always done, step in and fix everything. But this time, I wasn't going to respond the way they wanted me to. I wasn't going to be the one who always said yes, who always cleaned up their mess. I didn't respond to the email. Instead, I went to my desk, opened my laptop, and went through the trust documents again. I needed to be certain, needed to double-check that everything was in place. Once I made this move, there would be no going back. It was time to solidify my stance. As I sat there, my phone buzzed. A text. It was from Chloe. Grace, please, I'm begging you. I need your help. I'm not asking for a miracle. Just, please. I read the message, feeling a strange sense of indifference. Chloe always used to get what she wanted. She had spent her entire life asking, pleading, and getting what she needed without any real effort. And now, when things were tough for her, I was supposed to swoop in and save the day. I closed my phone and took a deep breath. I wasn't going to let myself be dragged back into that cycle. But the truth was, part of me still wanted to respond. Part of me wanted to help her, to do what I had always done. But then I remembered what had brought me to this moment. I wasn't just standing up for myself anymore. I was standing up for everything I had worked for. My peace, my independence, my life. The next day, I made an appointment with my lawyer. I needed to make sure that I was legally protected, that I couldn't be forced into any more unwanted obligations. When I met with him, he reviewed everything quickly. He explained the steps I needed to take to ensure that my rights were protected. I filed the necessary paperwork with the county clerk's office, securing my legal claim over the estate. It wasn't just about protecting the property. It was about making sure that I was never again going to be manipulated into taking on responsibilities that weren't mine to bear. But despite the legal protection, the emotional weight of the situation still hung over me. I wasn't entirely free yet. I knew my family would retaliate. They always did. But I was ready. This time, I had the tools to protect myself. This time, I wasn't going to let them push me around. The phone rang again a few days later. It was my mother. I hesitated for a moment, knowing this would be another conversation I didn't want to have. But I answered it anyway. "Grace," she said, her voice tight. "This is really serious. Chloe's wedding is a week away, and we're facing a crisis. We need you. You know we can't do this without you." Her words were laced with that familiar tone, the one that always made me feel like I was the only person who could help, the only one who had the power to fix everything. I let out a slow breath. "Mom," I said calmly, "I've made myself clear. I'm not helping. You and Chloe need to handle this on your own." "Grace, please," she implored, her voice softening just a little. "This isn't about the money. It's about family. It's about being there for each other when we need it the most." There it was again. The guilt, the manipulation, the attempt to make me feel selfish for not sacrificing everything for them. I could feel the old pressure starting to creep back in, the old patterns that I had fallen into so many times before. But I held firm. "No, Mom," I said, "this is about me standing up for myself. You and Chloe have always relied on me to fix your problem. I'm not doing it anymore. You're not my responsibility." I heard her take a deep breath on the other end of the line. "You'll regret this," she said softly. "You'll see. Family always comes first. Grace. And you'll regret not being there for us when we needed you." And with that, she hung up. "Where are you watching from? Hit subscribe. We need to talk about families, boundaries, and taking control of your life." It had been a week since I had made my stand. A week of silence. A week of watching my family scramble, trying to figure out how to proceed without me. I could feel their desperation through the messages and phone calls they kept sending, but I resisted the urge to respond. I was done. They had used me for years, and now I was drawing the line. But even in the quiet, I knew things weren't over. They wouldn't be. Family wasn't just about love, it was about power. And I had learned that power, for all its promises, came with strings. The strings I had been too blind to see until now. I had secured my rights over the property. Yes, the trust was in place, and I had filed the notice of interest with the county clerk. But there was still something missing, a piece of the puzzle that could solidify my position and protect me from what was sure to come. The next morning, as I sat in my apartment, sipping my coffee and scrolling through emails, I received a package. It wasn't anything fancy, just a small manila envelope. Addressed to me in the familiar handwriting of my family's lawyer. I didn't recognize the handwriting at first, but when I saw the law firm's logo on the corner, I knew exactly who it was from. I opened it slowly, taking a deep breath before pulling out the contents. The first paper I pulled out was the trust document I had signed years ago, the one that had been hidden in the shuffle of family drama and business deals. But this wasn't the trust I had reviewed recently. No, this was something new. There was a letter attached, a legal memo from the lawyer. I read it carefully, feeling the weight of every word as I processed what it was saying. "This letter is to inform you that your family has made an attempt to alter the terms of the trust. They are seeking to remove you as the trustee, claiming that your actions in the past few weeks have rendered you unfit for the role. However, the documents you signed remain in full effect. This notice serves as a reminder of your position and the legal protections granted to you under these terms. Any actions to change this agreement are now invalid, and we advise that you take the necessary steps to protect your interests moving forward." I stared at the letter, the words blurring together. My heart raced. They were trying to change the terms of the trust. They were trying to strip me of the very thing that protected me, the very thing I had worked so hard to secure. It wasn't just a betrayal. It was a power play, a final attempt to pull me back into their web. I exhaled slowly, trying to calm the storm in my mind. This wasn't over. It wasn't even close. I reached for the phone and called my lawyer. It was time to make sure they knew I wasn't backing down. 2 hours later, I sat across from my lawyer in his office. The thick air of the room was filled with the scent of paper, leather, and freshly brewed coffee. I pushed the letter across the table. my hands still shaking from the shock of it all. "This is what they're trying to do?" I asked, my voice low. "They're trying to change the trust. After everything?" He nodded, his face grim. "Yes. And it's not just about the money, it's about control. They're trying to regain the upper hand, trying to manipulate the situation in their favor. But this won't stand. You've got the documentation to prove you're the rightful trustee. This is a legal maneuver, nothing more." I exhaled sharply, feeling a strange sense of relief. What do I need to do next? First, we file a notice of opposition. It will block any attempts to change the terms of the trust. Then, we can move forward with securing your position. You're legally protected. Grace, they can't just take control from you, but we have to move fast. Once they realize they're losing, they'll escalate. They'll do whatever it takes to get you back under their thumb. I nodded, absorbing everything he said. It felt like the walls were closing in, like I was being dragged into something far bigger than I had anticipated. But I wasn't going to back down. Not now. Not after everything I had sacrificed. Later that day, I went to the courthouse. My hands were steady, my mind focused, but there was still a knot in my stomach. I had already filed the notice of interest. But now, I needed to file the official notice of opposition. This wasn't just about securing my rights. This was about making it crystal clear that I wasn't going to be pushed around anymore. The woman at the clerk's desk looked up as I approached, her expression kind and professional. I handed over the paperwork, watching as she stamped each document with the county seal. When she handed them back to me, the weight of the papers felt heavier than I expected. It was a small step, but it felt like I had taken a giant leap towards something I couldn't quite define. "You're all set," the clerk said, handing me the final copy. "You'll get a notification once it's processed." I nodded, the silence settling over me like a heavy blanket. But as I left the courthouse, I felt a sense of clarity I hadn't had in years. This was the right move. I wasn't going to let my family control me any longer. That evening, I went home to my apartment. It was a small, cozy place, and for the first time in a long time, it felt like my own. The clutter was minimal, the space clean and peaceful. There were no reminders of the family drama that had consumed me for so long. As I sat at my kitchen table, I allowed myself a moment of quiet. I looked over the paperwork again. The opposition had been filed. I had done everything I could to protect myself, to keep them from taking what was mine. But deep down, I knew this wasn't over. It was only just beginning. Where are you watching from? Hit subscribe. We need to talk about standing your ground when everything seems stacked against you. The silence was broken by the constant ringing of my phone. I had known it would come, but I wasn't ready for it. The messages and calls from my family were more insistent now. They were desperate. They couldn't understand why I had stopped helping, why I had drawn the line. They were starting to realize that this time, I wasn't going to be the easy target they'd always relied on. But I didn't respond. Not to the texts, not to the emails, not to the voicemails. Instead, I focused on the task at hand. The trust had been filed. The notice of opposition had been processed. My position as trustee was secure. I had spent years building my life, carving out a future where I didn't need to answer to anyone but myself. But now, with the family's move to strip me of my position, I realized just how deeply rooted the manipulation went. This wasn't just about a wedding, a house, or even money. This was about power. It had been a week since I filed the notice of opposition, and the tension in the air had grown unbearable. I felt the storm brewing, the inevitable confrontation just around the corner, but I couldn't back down. I had made my stand. Now, I had to see it through. I scheduled another meeting with my lawyer. This time, it was different. I could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on me. It wasn't just legal paperwork anymore. It was a fight for my future, a fight for my peace. When I walked into the lawyer's office, he was already sitting at his desk, papers scattered around him. He didn't even look up when I entered. He knew what was coming. We had talked about this, about how my family would try to maneuver their way back into control, how they would push every boundary to get what they wanted. But I wasn't going to let that happen. Not this time. "Grace," he said, without looking up. We've received the response from your family's attorney. They're making a move to challenge the trust. They're trying to invalidate your position as trustee, claiming you're unfit due to your recent actions. I felt a cold wave of anger wash over me. My grip on the table tightened as I leaned in. What are they saying? They're going after your credibility. They're painting you as unstable, someone who can't be trusted to manage the estate. They're trying to create doubt, to weaken your position. They want to use your recent decisions to argue that you're not fit to make the calls about the property anymore. I sat back in my chair, feeling the weight of what he said settle in my chest. It wasn't just about a wedding or a family crisis anymore. This was personal. They were going to do whatever it took to strip me of everything I had worked for. And the worst part was, I knew they were going to use my own family against me. Do we have a counter? I asked. My voice steady, but with a clear edge of frustration. Yes, he said, finally looking up at me. We have all the evidence we need. The documents are in your favor. The trust is valid. But this is going to be a fight. It's going to get ugly. They won't back down easily. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I had known this wasn't going to be easy. I had known it would come to this. But hearing it out loud, hearing the reality of the situation, it hit me harder than I expected. I don't care how ugly it gets, I said, my voice firm. I'm not backing down. I've worked too hard for this. For everything, they've taken enough from me. I won't let them take this. 2. The lawyer nodded, acknowledging the fire in my eyes. Good. We're going to file a motion to dismiss their claims, and if they don't back off, we'll proceed with legal action. It's your move. Grace, you've made it clear that you're not going to let them control you anymore. Now, we'll make sure the court sees it that way. The next few days were a blur. There was a flurry of legal filings, motions, and paperwork, all with the sole purpose of defending my position. Every time I received another letter from their attorney, it felt like a punch to the gut. But I wasn't going to back down. I couldn't. I had already come this far, and there was no turning back now. The hardest part wasn't the legal battle, though. It was the emotional toll. My family's attempts to drag me into their web, their constant phone calls, the guilt they tried to make me feel. Those were the real weapon. It was a war of attrition. They knew that if they could wear me down emotionally, they could break me. But I wasn't going to let that happen. One night, as I sat alone in my apartment, reviewing more legal documents, I got a call from my mother. The moment I saw her name on the screen, I felt my heart rate spike. I had been avoiding her calls for days. But this time, I picked up. I knew it was coming. She wouldn't give up. Grace, she said, her voice soft, almost pleading. You don't have to do this. We're family. You don't have to fight us. We can work things out. Chloe's wedding is falling apart, and everything is spiraling. I'm asking you to be the bigger person here. Help us out, please. For the family. I could hear the desperation in her voice, but I also knew what this was. It wasn't about the wedding. It wasn't about family. It was about control. It always had been. No. Mom, I said, my voice steady. I've made my decision. I'm done letting you manipulate me. I'm done being the one who fixes everything. You and Chloe need to handle this on your own. There was a long silence on the other end. I could hear her breathing, but she didn't say anything. Finally, she spoke. You'll regret this, she said softly. You'll see. One day, you'll regret not being there when we needed you. I felt a pang of guilt twist in my chest, but I pushed it aside. I'm not the one who needs to change. Mom, you and Chloe are the ones who need to figure out how to stand on your own. I can't keep doing this for you. I hung up before she could respond. It wasn't easy, but it was the right thing to do. Where are you watching from? Hit subscribe. We need to talk about taking back control of your life, even when everyone is against you. A few days passed since my last conversation with my mother. Every day was a mix of waiting for the inevitable, waiting for the backlash, and working to ensure my legal position was fortified. I had filed the motions, I had secured my rights, and I had no intention of backing down. But as I went through the motion, a small part of me still braced for what would happen when the inevitable confrontation finally came. I knew it was coming. They wouldn't let it go this easily. That moment came earlier than I expected. I was sitting at my desk, reviewing the legal documents. When my phone rang, the number on the screen made my heart drop. It was from my father. He rarely called, especially not when it came to anything involving the family's legal matters. This, I knew, wasn't going to be a pleasant conversation. I hesitated for a moment, then answered, "Grace." My father's voice came through the line, surprisingly calm. "We need to talk. It's time for us to have an adult conversation." I sat up straighter in my chair. The tone of his voice, that calm, deliberate tone, told me everything. He wasn't calling to ask how I was doing or to check in on me. No, this was something else. This was the start of the family's move to wear me down, to make me feel guilty for what I was doing. I could already feel the pressure mounting. "What's going on?" "Dad," I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm listening." "Look, Grace, we know this situation with the trust has been hard on everyone," he began, his voice carrying the weight of years of family dynamic. "But you're not seeing the bigger picture here. Chloe's wedding isn't just an event. It's a symbol. It's about family. It's about keeping the legacy together. And you're breaking it apart. You're breaking us apart." His words hit harder than I anticipated. Family. Legacy. I had heard these words from them for years. Always used to manipulate me into doing what they wanted. They always made it sound like I was the one who was wrong, the one who didn't understand the bigger picture. But for the first time, I realized something. I was the one who had been keeping the family together, not them. "I'm not breaking anything." "Dad," I said, my voice firm, "I'm not the one who's been asking for help every time things get difficult. I'm not the one who's been using family as an excuse to manipulate others into doing their bidding." There was a long pause on the other end. I could hear my father's breath, slow and steady, as if he was trying to process what I had just said. He had never been one to engage in direct confrontation. He had always been the silent observer, the one who stayed out of the fray. But now, I could hear the frustration in his voice as he spoke again. "I've been silent for too long. Grace, but you need to understand something. We've been doing this for years. You don't just get to walk away from the family. You don't get to make a decision like this and expect everything to stay the same. Maybe it's time things changed," I replied, my voice unwavering. "I've been the one who's always picked up the pieces. Dad, I've been the one who's always stepped in when Chloe needed help. But not anymore. Not this time. Grace, listen to me," he said, his voice low. "This is going too far. You're going to regret it. You can't turn your back on us." "I'm not turning my back on anyone," I said, my voice colder now. "I'm finally standing up for myself. For once, I'm doing what's best for me, and not just what's best for everyone else." I could hear his frustration building. "You're making a mistake," he repeated, his words growing more desperate. "You're making a decision you'll regret. You'll see. You can't walk away from family." I stood up from my desk, pacing around the room. "I'm not walking away, Dad. I'm walking towards something better. Something that doesn't involve constantly sacrificing my own happiness and well-being for people who will never appreciate it." He was silent for a moment, then spoke again, his tone softening just a little. "Grace, I'm trying to understand, but I don't know if you understand what you're doing." I stopped pacing, the weight of his words hanging in the air. "I understand perfectly," I said quietly. "For the first time in my life, I understand exactly what I need, and it's not to keep playing the role of the family martyr." The silence stretched between us. I waited for him to say something, anything, but it never came. Finally, I spoke. "I've made my decision. Dad, I'm not going to change it. I'm not going to let you or anyone else manipulate me into doing something I don't want to do anymore." There was a long pause before his voice came back, low and resigned. "We'll see. Grace, we'll see how long this lasts. But don't come crying when it all falls apart." I ended the call, my hands trembling. The conversation had been brutal, but necessary. For once, he hadn't caved. I had said what needed to be said, and for the first time in years, I felt free from their web of guilt and manipulation. That evening, the phone rang again, Chloe. I knew she wouldn't let it go. Grace, she pleaded, her voice strained. You can't just walk away. Mom, Dad, everyone's counting on you. Her tone carried the same old manipulation, that familiar guilt, but I wasn't going to fall for it this time. No. Chloe, I've always been the one fixing everything. That ends now. Please, she begged. You're my sister. You're supposed to be there for me. I was there for you, over and over. But I can't keep sacrificing when no one else ever does. You need to figure this out on your own. The silence that followed said more than words. And though guilt pricked at me, I reminded myself I wasn't responsible for their happiness or their mistakes. The days that followed blurred together legal filings, motions, late-night strategy calls with my lawyer. At the same time, the barrage of texts and calls from my family never stopped. Each one dripped with guilt, each one begging me to give in, but I had made my choice. Then came the knock at the door. My family's lawyer stood there, stone-faced, handing me papers. They're taking this to court, he said flatly. I wasn't surprised. I had expected it. And this time, I was ready. Reading through their demands that I step down as trustee or face legal action, I almost laughed. They still thought intimidation would work. They still thought I was the same weak person they could bend. Later, sitting with my own lawyer, I felt the weight of it all settle in. They don't have a valid claim, he assured me. We'll counter. We're in the right. It was going to get ugly, he warned me of that, but I was no longer afraid. I was done being their scapegoat. The calls kept coming, my mother's voice breaking with guilt. Chloe's messages laced with anger. But I held firm. I wasn't backing down. And then, a breakthrough. My lawyer called to say the court had dismissed their claim. Their attempt to strip me of control was invalid. For the first time, I felt it. Power. Freedom. Proof that I wasn't powerless anymore. But the story didn't end there. My mother tried again, sending me a message dripping with guilt. I typed my final answer with steady hands. I've made my decision. I'm not turning back. I'm doing what's best for me. Days later, another call from my lawyer. They're dropping the case. It's over. You've won. I sat back, stunned. After a lifetime of bending, sacrificing, and being used, I had finally stood my ground, and I had won.